Our next speaker will be speakers. We'll have two folks. Bill O'Grady is not here, but his co-speaker, Robin Reed, is here, and then she will be with Bill Ryland. They'll be speaking on the same topic, so there's no change in the subject. It's Sunken Gardens, Paradise Preserved. And I do have some brief bio information on Robin. I'll just read this. She has been a volunteer at Sunken Gardens for the past dozen years. Robin's focus has been the preservation of the garden's historic features. In 2010, she assisted in applying for and receiving a Preserve America grant and persuading the city of St. Petersburg to provide matching funds for a master plan for the gardens. As archivist, she gathered together a committee to sort through and file historical materials and scan thousands of photographs originally belonging to the Turner family. Currently, she has a small group of volunteers who are raising funds to augment the flamingo collection. And I guess we'll get some bio about Bill from himself. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome to Sunken Gardens, St. Petersburg's very own roadside attraction. As was mentioned, I've been a volunteer at Sunken Gardens for over 10 years now. It's been a very exciting time. This is Bill Ryland. Bill, do you want to mention?
I'm a garden specialist at the gardens. I am developing a volunteer program. I do tours. I'm in charge of, we have Saturday horticultural classes, and I do special events and pretty much a little bit of everything. I have a degree in biology, and I'm a certified horticulture professional, and before working at the gardens, I worked for the Department of Environmental Protection for 25 years.
We are going to talk a little bit about faux stonework this afternoon, so some of you who heard the program downstairs will have to determine whether it's actually authentic or not. The development of St. Petersburg began in 1875. The railroad came to town in 1888, and in 1903, the city was incorporated. There were approximately 2,000 residents in the city at that time. Bill?
George Turner Sr. was a plumber from Jacksonville, and he moved to St. Petersburg in 1903. He bought almost 20 acres, including one parcel that had a shallow pond which had formed within an ancient sinkhole. George drained the water from the pond, giving access to rich black muck soil, and he also had a drier, sandy upland area around the edge. In 1906, George married Eula, and Eula was a St. Petersburg native. At the time, the Turner property, which is now Sunken Gardens, was located on the outskirts of St. Petersburg among extensive orange groves and cattle farms. In 1910, Mr. Turner built the family homestead on the site of what is now the Oak Pavilion. Additionally, he built a log cabin office, a gift shop, and a sales counter for fruit and vegetables. As word of Mr. Turner's garden spread, many visitors would come to purchase fruit, juices, vegetables, and ornamentals. But even more came to stroll through the gardens because they could see unusual tropical plantings. On one particular Sunday, when more than 200 visitors came to just stroll in the gardens, George, being an entrepreneur, decided to fence the garden in and charge a nickel to stroll through the gardens. This was the beginning of Sunken Gardens. St. Petersburg enjoyed a rapid period of development, including the construction of the Gandy Bridge linking St. Petersburg to Tampa, which cut the driving time in half. Also under construction were the main entrance to Sunken Gardens, which was built in 1926 as the city's sanitary public market, which is shown here. The Renaissance Vinoy Hotel, the Coliseum, and many other buildings were built about this time. With improved roadways and infrastructure and the spread of automobile travel during this time, tourists began to enjoy what many found to be accessible pieces of paradise, and Florida roadside attractions were born.
By 1936, when the gardens officially opened to the public, the Turners had extensive plantings of tropical fruit trees, some vegetables, and the majestic palms that are there now. On the right, you can see some Cuban royal palms. They were planted from seed by George Turner in 1903. He had originally intended to sell them, but they became so large that they couldn't be moved and would eventually become really the backbone of the landscape at Sunken Gardens. As time passed, the Turners added many features that enhanced the unique character of the gardens. One of these on the top left are crazy-paved walkways that they constructed of broken pieces of concrete and stained in bright primary colors. They had them circle throughout the garden because it increased the sense of space. And they, of course, wanted bigger was obviously better even then. They also added ponds and waterfalls. All of them used gravity to keep the water moving. They planted a cactus garden, a rose garden, and literally hundreds of azaleas and camellias and gardenias. So popular had the garden become in 1940 that they built this little Mediterranean Revival entrance building on 18th Avenue. It's now used for bird care, but we are hoping that in the future it will become a small museum for Sunken Gardens. Following World War II, a floodgate of tourism opened, and Sunken Gardens, along with scores of other attractions, boomed. They ranged, of course, ran the gamut from the beautiful to the bizarre. Many of them were considered tourist traps. Sunken Gardens, on the other hand, became a real focus for the local community. Many weddings were held there, rites of passage events such as confirmations, teas, beauty pageants. These are some of the more bizarre beauty pageants that were held there. And then in 1952, the gardens made the last major development was done during George Sr.'s tenure in the garden. They built a mid-century modern structure that faced 4th Street north. And as you've heard, 4th Street was a major thoroughfare that basically connected the Gandy Bridge to downtown. So there was an enormous amount of tourist traffic. These are some of the beautiful photographs from that era. I can tell you the archives has 8,000 photographs now. These show really the Turner's talent at combining the lush tropical foliage with a more manicured type of landscaping that became popular in the 50s and 60s. They were very good at it. Like many of the other roadside attractions, publicity and public relations was of paramount importance to the Turner family. They had billboards along the major highways throughout the South. They themselves were founding members of the Florida Attractions Association, and they had a publicity person on their staff as early as the early 1960s. Pretty girls were always a feature in the public relations campaign. The earliest postcards, this is one of them, and the publicity photographs often included friends and family members posed amongst the lush tropical foliage in the garden. Eventually, they added hooped-skirted girls to stroll through the garden for the benefit of amateur photographers, quote unquote, and then eventually installed bathing beauties that were usually wearing bathing suits and high heels. There are literally hundreds of these photographs in the collection as well. This type of thing was sent to local newspapers throughout the country, urging would-be tourists to come to the Sunshine City and see Sunken Gardens. Today, countless families reside in St. Petersburg because of their parents and their grandparents had been enticed by some of these pretty girls and some of the other advertising that was done to move to this idyllic location. Yeah.
The next major addition to Sunken Gardens had actually begun during the time of George Turner Sr., with the addition of a flock of 17 Chilean flamingos brought to Sunken Gardens in 1956. So popular were the flamingos that soon many more species of exotic birds and animals were introduced. In 1966, the gardens contained 2 aviaries and among 220 species on display, among them macaws, toucans, cranes, swans, and many more. Many of the birds were trained to perform popular tricks of the day, from roller skating to playing basketball. Tropical birds and animals remain a part of Sunken Gardens' identity today. Obviously, they are no longer required to perform tricks, but instead are used to educate visitors about wildlife habitat loss and appropriate care of large pet birds. After 1967, the Turners used their newly developed faux rock building technique to create a number of fanciful custom pens, cages, aviaries, pools, and nesting sites around the gardens. Having purchased the Coca-Cola bottling plant in 1966, which you saw earlier in the picture of the Sanitary Public Market building, the Turners set about converting the entrance into a cave motif. With the popularity of that entrance, the same technique was used to construct various waterfalls, faux stone structures, and animal enclosures for various birds, monkeys, pygmy goats, capybaras, wallabies, alligators, and turtles. The addition of exotic birds and animals was a very natural transition in keeping with the garden's nature-themed experience and with Florida's history and culture. Throughout its history as an attraction, Sunken Gardens constantly added things of beauty, curiosity, or whimsy to maintain and increase visitor appeal. In addition to plantings, other living creatures, water features, and other site elements meant to grab visitor attention and provide a memorial experience. Sunken Gardens also developed a series of draws in the last 3 decades that unfortunately had little relation to its original nature-oriented theme. In 1968, it opened what was called the world's largest gift shop, encompassing more than 22,500 square feet in the old Sanitary Public Market building acquired from Coca-Cola. Also unveiled in 1968 was the King of Kings exhibit, which was wax figures depicting scenes from the life of Christ. But in 1971, Disney World opened just 2 hours away. By the end of the decade, all of Florida's old attractions that were still in existence were losing ground to the new model of experience of big theme parks. Technological cutting edge based on fantasy experience and tied to national media and culture rather than anything authentically local or regional, Disney World and the other mega theme parks that followed transformed public expectations in what a vacation should be. In a last-ditch effort to save Sunken Gardens, in 1994, the Turners unveiled one last performance venue for an existing alligator wrestling act. It was called Kachunga and the Alligator Show, but it was not enough. Unable to maintain sufficient visitor admissions, 4 years later, Sunken Gardens was for sale.
The city of St. Petersburg designated Sunken Gardens a historic landmark in 1998, and almost immediately there was discussion about the possible purchase of the site. In the end, the city council decided to let the residents determine whether the city would purchase the property. And indeed, they held a referendum, and the citizens voted themselves a one-year tax increase to purchase the gardens. I think it's an amazing thing, really. The Turner family closed down the gardens in 1999, selling off most all of the animals except for a few of the tropical birds and, of course, the beloved flamingos. One very pressing issue was what to do with this huge, enormous, biggest gift shop in the world. They finally determined that part of it would be leased out for the Great Explorations Children's Museum, part of it to a restaurant, and the remainder would be used as the entrance to Sunken Gardens, office space for staff, and a small gift shop. The building itself was renovated in 2002. It was done in the original 1926 Mediterranean revival style, so gone was the cave entrance. This is a photograph of the actual south side of the building, which is the entrance now to Sunken Gardens and Great Explorations. The gardens themselves were also in an unfortunate state. The environmental challenges were there that were caused by the kerosene heaters that are used to protect the gardens and the plants in the wintertime. There was massive overgrowth. Tons of materials and debris were carried out of the gardens, and many so-called improvements were begun by the city. The 1952 mid-century modern entrance building was demolished. Faux stone animal cages gradually turned into planting beds for plants. Sections of the crazy paving, if they were damaged, were replaced by concrete sidewalks. The planting beds around the wedding lawn were increased in area, so that it was becoming a smaller and smaller place to hold special events. Basically, the roadside attraction was fast becoming a botanical garden. Fortunately, with a grant from Preserve America, the city embarked on a master planning process. It included a cultural landscape report done by David Sachs, who is an expert in the field. And I have to tell you, it is a fabulous document. I'm sure Sunken Gardens will be using it well into the future. In it, he identified the core area of historically significant spaces, and those you can see on one of his maps here is the light blue color and the yellow. And it basically includes the character-defining elements, which are the crazy-paved walkways, the faux stone animal enclosures, the waterfalls, the ponds, the 1940 entrance building, all of the things that make Sunken Gardens so unique. The areas in brown are considered the unhistoric areas, if there is such a word, and we hope at some point that this might be where we put some walk-in aviaries similar to those that the Turners had in their time. Recommendations for the future include renovating animal enclosures. This had been an injured eagle's cage. Originally, it was turned into a planting bed, and now it's being turned back into an animal enclosure. We hope to have toucans there in the future. The crazy-paved walkways are being repaired rather than replaced. We're trying out some different staining techniques. This is a section of the restaining. It's quite eye-catching. I think unfortunately, a lot of the cleaning of the original colors were washed out with pressure washing, which was done over the years to make the pathways safe for passage. So we're hoping that this will be a good solution. The ponds and water features are also being renovated, and that includes the original tile drainage system installed by George Turner Sr. The tree canopy is being thinned to let more light into the understory plants. Vistas and view sheds are being restored. And to further entice the younger generation, which now enjoys the koi and the tropical birds and, of course, the flamingos, we're hoping to have a children's area, which will include a repurposed pygmy goat pen, kind of a hobbit-like entrance. The area will include environmental and nature-based exhibits for young people. We also hope, of course, to have a baby alligator, because what is a roadside attraction in Florida without an alligator? And we don't have one anymore. And of course, as was mentioned, we have a campaign to quote, restock the flock of our flamingos. We're down to only 2 flamingos of the 17 that were originally in the garden. The landscape today consists of really a mixture of what the Turners had over the years. We still have tropical fruit trees, exotic tropical shrubs and plants, and of course the majestic palms, and some areas of landscaping still that mimic the Turners' more formal landscaping of massed annuals and perennials. The master plan also made recommendations, of course, for finances and management and those kinds of issues that are facing historic sites today that are so important to maintain a viability of the organizations and the sites. Sunken Gardens today continues to be a center of community activity. Weddings are held there and special events. Holidays are celebrated. Of course, it's a beautiful location for that. And we have plant festivals throughout the year. This was an orchid festival that happened last weekend. We had over 1,200 people attend. So these are just some of the steps that are being taken to maintain, are being taken to make certain that Sunken Gardens remains a roadside attraction created by the 3 generations of the Turner family, one that offers a glimpse of a unique vision for a quintessentially Florida landscape. We hope you will be on the tour tomorrow to come and see Sunken Gardens for yourselves. It will be very brief. I understand only 30 minutes exactly. So we hope you will come back and spend a little more time with us and enjoy our beautiful roadside attraction, Sunken Gardens. Thank you.